Hi, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to tonight's Churchill Club meeting.
I'm not sure you're on.
My name is Karen Tucker. I'm CEO of the Churchill Club. And our program tonight is called Battle for the Buy. We are privileged to have with us Venky Harinarayan, Cambrian Ventures, Ratnakar Lavu of Kohl, Patricia Nakache of Trinity Ventures, Brian Walker of SAP Hybris, and of course our moderator, Avery Lyford of Blueprint Growth Partners and Qubell. Welcome to our speakers, and thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Yeah.
For our new guests in the audience, a brief introduction to Churchill Club, a nonprofit devoted to encouraging innovation, economic growth, and societal benefit. We convene up to 40 programs each year in the interest of connecting bright, motivated people with ideas and one another. And we certainly do always encourage our speakers to say something that matters. Don't pitch, don't repeat insights that are already readily available out there, but rather try to advance collective thinking. And each and every speaker that crosses the Churchill stage does hear this message from us. We certainly welcome you to join and support us and participate in the conversations that we convene on a regular basis. In addition to tonight, we have two other fantastic programs this month. Next week on June 17 at the Four Seasons East Palo Alto, it's going to be all about drones. We're starting on the consumer end of that spectrum and looking at opportunities for innovation from there. And we have some of the most creative and successful people who are coming to speak with us who are working in that space. And then on June 23rd at the Computer History Museum, we look at the road ahead for automotive transportation, and also, of course, focusing on opportunities and strategies, et cetera. Not yet on our website are two programs in July, one with distinguished educator, author, and journalist Mike Malone, and that will be, he has an opus, a new book out called The Intel Trinity. And he has a lot of insights around leadership, and it's one of the greatest business stories of our time. So that is going to be a very interesting program. And the second one in July is with youth and digital culture expert Dana Boyd. So keep a watch out for those. And then finally, even though it's a little way out, on September 25th, we present the Churchill Awards, which we call the Churchills. And there are 4 categories, and they represent things that we care about very much. One is leadership, the other is innovation, one is collaboration, and the fourth is social good or societal benefit. And it's a really inspiring evening, and it's also an evening that you could think of bringing other family members because they too will have a chance to be inspired and enjoy that program. Remember that most of our programs are available for viewing on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Churchill Club. And we've recently had some amazing conversations, too, that I think you'd enjoy. Reid Hoffman with Joey Ito, the head of the MIT Media Lab, and also our 16th annual Top 10 Tech Trends event. So check it out. If you're tweeting tonight, please use the hashtag Churchill Club, and you will find other Twitter codes in your printed programs. And then finally, we are extremely grateful to our host, SAP, for allowing us to convene here tonight, especially Christine Johnson, Jeff Kerr, and Jonathan Becker. And also our program supporters, Grid Dynamics and Qubell. Thank you so much, all of you. We really appreciate it. In addition to being chairman of Qubell, our moderator, Avery Lyford, is the founder of Blueprint Growth Partners. And there he focuses on helping promising technology companies, large and small, to drive high growth. He is also a board member at GoGrid and board emeritus at the Churchill Club, where he remains an extremely active advisor. Please welcome Avery, who will then ask our speakers to self-introduce.
Thank you, Karen. We've got a really interesting panel here that covers the whole gamut from the incumbent who's using technology to the pure attacker. And I'm going to let each of the people quickly introduce themselves and then get right into it. Sure.
Venky Harinarayan, partner at Cambrian Ventures, an early stage venture capital firm. Prior to this, I created at Walmart Labs and years prior to that, I was at Amazon in the early days.
Ratnakar, Lavu. I head up digital technology and transformation for Kohl's. Prior to that, I built out Redbox, and prior to that, I built out Macy's.com and Macy's. So.
Patricia, Nakache, general partner with Trinity Ventures. We're an early stage venture firm founded in 1986. About half of what we invest in is consumer technology, half is enterprise technology. But originally we invested actually back in 1986, we invested in bricks and mortar retail companies like Starbucks and Jamba Juice and P.F. Chang's. And more recently, we've shifted that to technology, and we've invested in some of the up-and-comers like Zulily.
And hi, everyone. Brian Walker. I'm Chief Strategy Officer at Hybris, an SAP company. I go back with retail really very, very early in my career as a merchant and a marketer, and was a part of the team that started EddieBauer.com back in 1997. Went on to work at Amazon as well, kind of at a later stage than you did, but and then by way of Expedia, ended up at Forrester covering the commerce technology research area, commerce technology area. And now part of Hybris. And we provide a commerce platform for both traditional retailers, many other industries as well, but also some pure plays that are really kind of attacking the space. Folks like Karmaloop or companies of that nature. ASOS is another client of ours. So we kind of see both ends of the spectrum and really try to facilitate our clients, a capability to sell across channel.
Now it's interesting. It used to be this whole notion of it was digital versus physical, and the world's gotten a lot more nuanced. And Ratnakar, for instance, your title isn't about, it's about digital innovation. So I'm curious, kind of your perspective on how the physical retailers can take advantage of mobile technology and other technologies, because I think this is one of the interesting big shifts over the last decade or so.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. So when the internet came about, everybody's like, okay, the stores are going to die, right? That's not going to happen. So we will have the physical footprint, we will have the digital footprint, and even in the digital footprint, things are transforming, right? So if you have the web, you have mobile, you'll have wearables, you'll have connected cars. But the key thing, I think, as we think about innovation, we think about it as how do you take that digital experiences and bring it into the physical footprint? Because as our customers are getting acclimated to newer technologies, their expectations of what they see in the store is fundamentally changing. And so when we think about innovation, we're also thinking about not just the digital footprint that we kind of work on, but how do we take that digital footprint into the physical store and make that in-store experience both one that is traditional in terms of how a physical store is, as well as enhance that with the kind of the digital experiences that we're creating.
Yeah, I would say that when you think about the value proposition that physical outlets provide to consumers, selection, get it now, try it on, see if it fits, touch and feel it. Slowly but surely, I think the digital alternatives are starting to chip away at all those value propositions. And I think the challenge for physical stores is that they have to really think about reinventing the experience in the store. Make it something that is truly unique, a value proposition that you really can't get online or on mobile. Because I do think that slowly but surely each of those are sort of getting chipped away at, and I think that they're, traffic, we were talking, traffic to physical stores is declining, and they need to be thinking about what is the experience and how is it going to be differentiated in the store.
So just to add to what Patricia is saying, I think stores today actually serve two sort of functions. One is to be a showroom, the other one is to do fulfillment. And definitely the fulfillment side for a lot of products is going to change. The store is increasingly going to play the role of a showroom, and it's not clear that the stores are just going to survive all the way through because of mobile and so on, because to be a showroom, you don't need that much space. The amount of real estate that you have, it's not clear that outside of groceries, outside of services that need to be delivered sort of in location, there's really going to be stores surviving unscathed over the next 10 years or so. I think there's going to be a serious rethink of what a physical presence means And actually, my view is it's going to be hard for the incumbents to really sort of navigate this omni-channel opportunity, just because you have invested so much in your physical real estate, so much in the systems to run this physical real estate, that to suddenly change it on a dime to meet a different customer expectation is not going to be that easy. I think the real opportunity for a startup, in my mind, is potentially for a new startup to come in with a brand and a consumer experience that's unique, that truly delivers on the omni-channel promise. And I think that is something that, for me, would be very exciting. There's actually a consumer brand which potentially can be created, most likely in apparel or fashion, where I think the notion of actually having a showroom and fulfillment done in the cloud, I think would be very interesting.
Well, I just say one example. I mean, that's interesting is Warby Parker,
Exactly.
right? Purveyor of eyeglasses online. They opened up a physical
Exactly.
outlet in New York City. Whether they'll expand beyond that, I don't know. But that's an interesting example, I think, of also the challenges of building trust with consumers. I think one of the benefits of physical outlet is that sort of gives you credibility.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, they really exist. There's really a company there, right?
Yeah, so there's a couple of interesting things, I'd just like to comment on. I think one is the role of the store absolutely has to change. I think it's kind of interesting how the build out of retail in the 80s and 90s now looks like, a huge mistake. Huge big box stores, all the inventory out on the sales floor, no operations for the back office for fulfillment. Yep. So, it's almost like you need to cut those stores in half, turn half of it into a fulfillment center and half of it into a showroom, right? Yep. And so it's going to be a very difficult transition. I don't know how Kohl's views that, but I think it's kind of interesting how 40% in some cases of retail now is being done through in-store pickup. But
Absolutely.
the retail operations aren't really prepared for that.
Yes, so a couple of things, right? So we already have this footprint. So one of the things that we're thinking about is, to your point, how do you leverage them in order to compete with Amazon, right? How do you leverage them for fulfillment so that we can do same-day delivery in particular markets? So we're already thinking about ship from store. We're thinking about, which we do already, as well as thinking about buy online, pick up in store. So some of the capabilities in terms of fulfillment are there, but to your other point of how do you transition that experience within the store is key, because if we don't do that, you're right, we won't survive.
And I think it comes down to convenience. The truth is, if you look at the data, consumers still like going to stores. It's still their preferred channel. The challenge is they don't have time for it anymore.
Demo? What demo? For which demo?
Women, ages 18 to 35, the sweet spot for
Actually,
retail.
I'll make a point to that.
So I'm saying, I think, if you were to say, what is your most preferred channel? They're going to say,
actually, let me sort of qualify that further. I think going to the mall is still a very interesting experience. And none of the stores that you see in the mall have really made the transition online. Right. But all the other stuff has moved to Amazon. I think that's the opportunity for e-commerce, is how do I move stores in the mall?
But the issue is
the curated. Are you talking about like the curated?
Curated, that experience. That's people still are not
Right,
buying
right.
that stuff. And if you compare the online versus offline, that's still not anywhere close to where books is today.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
But the challenge is it's not convenient to go to the mall or to go downtown, right? So now I can shop anytime I want, in my pocket at the stoplight if I want to, but certainly from my couch.
No, but I guess the point I'm making is
shopping is penetrated every moment of our life now through the digital channels. And it's no longer convenient for me to think about shopping. I have to plan that with my family, right? Now it's like, oh, on Saturday we're going to go do this thing called shopping.
Well, you can have true impulse. You can do true impulse shopping right now with mobile. But I think there's a lot of focus on sort of the interface, the mobile, sort of how the consumer's interacting with the retailer, whether it's in a physical store or online or on mobile. But I think the other part of the innovation that's going on is also just in the business models that some of these, innovative companies are bringing to the table. Zulily, which is one company we're involved with, one of the very innovative parts of their model is that they are basically inventory free, right? That most of their product that they sell, and their $1 billion run rate, is actually on consignment, or they're not actually even taking the product until it's ordered by the consumer. That has implications for the whole kind of, the economics of the business, particularly in terms of how capital efficiently they can grow. It's not only do they not have to build physical stores, they don't have to be investing in inventory. So I think that that is another threat actually for incumbents, right? It's like these business models that are very differentiated.
And fast fashion has shown how disruptive it can be, reacting to consumer preferences and getting restocked within weeks. But now you're saying, forget the supply chain altogether, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No, but then again, I think to keep in mind, Amazon too didn't start wanting to take inventory, right? But what happens is, if you want a really good customer experience, you get sucked into inventory, because the minute you do not take inventory, you basically have no control of the experience. And so that's, at some point, my view is even Zulily will, if you have to trade margins, you got to trade the supply chain, all the stuff you're doing against the customer experience.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's
There's
a
a
hard
trade-off
trade-off,
certainly in delivery times. There's
Right.
no question about that. Yeah.
Well, one of the interesting things, if you go back, historically, one of the largest sources of billion-dollar companies is innovations in retail. You look at the big box stores, you look at, Staples, you just go
retail.
over every 10 years, there's a big revolution. What seems to be interesting in the last 10 years is how much more that's technology-driven revolution. Big box will just get a bunch of cheap space at the edge of town, pack it full of electronics, and there you got Best Buy. And now technology has become the driver for retail innovation. And so I'm really curious how you take advantage of that without losing all the skills around merchandising and really understanding your customers and working with the brands, because those are very different worlds.
So very quickly, when both at Amazon and Walmart, retail actually can be boiled down to three variables, right? It's assortment, it's price, and it's convenience. That's it. If you're going to make a difference in retail, you have to change one of these variables, and significantly. Walmart was all about price, and convenience sort of actually was against convenience, because it was the outskirts of the smaller towns, and selection was what was there, right? And Amazon, when we started, was all about be the place where people can come to find anything that they want to buy. It was all about selection. Price was definitely not on the radar in the early days. And the third sort of company that I'd say is changing the world considerably right now is Uber. Uber is all about, in my mind, convenience. It's all a one-touch sort of arrival of a cab. So I just think fundamentally retail innovation is very simple. Whatever you do, you're going to have to change one of these three things. Otherwise, the customer doesn't care about it.
Yeah, and I think as we think about it, over time, price is going to become much harder to compete on. It has to be, to your point, selection or the convenience. It's the experience, I think, and going back to the earlier point of, if you give the best experience with the right merchandise and you have the right selection there, I think the customer will definitely want that. Price is going to be really hard to play, because there's so many players now in price. And that is something that we're looking at changing in terms of the customer experience, as well as the tie-in into certain brands in terms of selection that will kind of resonate more with our customers.
Yeah, I mean, I would say we definitely shy away from investing in e-commerce players that are selling product that can be price shopped.
Right.
Right. I mean, if it's just there's just no Amazon is evaluating prices every 2 to 15 minutes. I mean,
But I also think brands and vertically integrated retailers, I think, is another avenue here, right? Where I think the relationship with brands and the products those brands are developing is actually getting stronger, while retail is actually being disintermediated in a sense. So I think there's an interesting shift there. And I think as more and more products become packaged with services, as we start thinking about wearables and other things, I think that'll even strengthen that relationship even stronger. And that's where maybe it does advantage Amazon in a sense, just in terms of I'm already habituated to shopping there, but my relationship is really with the product I'm buying and starting to use and thinking about interacting with on a daily, hourly basis, right? I think that's a really another interesting shift that I think is very disruptive to retail as a whole.
Yep.
Just coming back to your question, I think one of the areas in retail, e-commerce, and in offline, which is sort of really technology has not impacted much, is merchandising. And I believe that it's still done the old-fashioned way, gut level sort of choices about what products to sort of to put out on the shelves. And what we are seeing at Walmart Labs, and what I saw when I was there, was there's a lot of stuff you can do there to actually help a merchant / replace a merchant in terms of what products actually you need to put out there. Because the one great thing about the web today is demand can actually be measured in real time. You can figure out what the competitive nature of any product is, what the margin structure should be. Should you be putting money to marketing or to price? And so there's a lot of signals out there that are very interesting, but that's still an area which is very early in my mind.
Or, you know, Amazon now, right, having some pretty sophisticated forecasting tools
Exactly,
to actually predict, like, okay, so iPhone 6 in October, whenever that is, you know, no one's going to be smarter at predicting what kind of inventory they need to control, whether that be in their warehouses or with the vendor, than Amazon, right? And it's by forecasting that demand, by monitoring traffic and having a rich history of previous products, right?
And usually that gets set in toys. Toys is the hardest category because you got to buy like a few months ahead and you got to make huge bets on the holidays, and you know, it's amazing how often they get it wrong.
Exactly. It's still very old school.
Yeah. You know, another area, there's a technology area that I think you know, is emerging and very exciting, I think, for incumbent retailers is you know, there are a lot of technology platforms that help drive traffic into stores that are emerging. Just, you know, we're invested in a company called MaxPoint. They do hyper-local targeted advertising to drive in-store traffic. That's their, you know, that is their focus, and you know, they can tie that into even sort of inventory systems, so they can in real time provide offers online tied to what inventory is sitting in the store. And you could see that becoming very dynamic. And there are a bunch of really interesting mobile couponing companies that are, you know, doing the same in grocery, for instance. And you know, I think that's a big opportunity.
Yeah, as I think about merchandising, so one of the things that I'm thinking about in terms of the future is 3D printing, right? That will fundamentally, I think, change how a retailer thinks about merchandising. And how, you know, this notion of, well, you know, there's actually a buyer and a merchant, and they will have to kind of put the orders and other things, and the POs, cut the POs and all of that, that is going to fundamentally shift. And that's going to shift because the creation of that is probably not going to be in a retailer like us. The creation of those templates for 3D printing, whether you take toys or other things, is going to be someone in the community and that they're going to do and design those templates, and then we'll leverage that as kind of a product. So that's going to, I think, change the game.
Yeah, we're already talking to customers who really are trying to build a 3D printing marketplace.
Right.
Right, leveraging our software. But I mean, what's interesting about that is how does that disrupt the entire supply chain?
That is very true.
All the way back to Asia,
right?
And all that infrastructure that's been built to provide us those products, you know, inexpensively. Pretty interesting.
One area that's very interesting is the change in the world because of mobile, and the number of people that either look at mobile to get information about products or get prompted to make a decision, or use it as a reference point in a shopping process. It seems to be threaded all the way through it. I'd be really interested to very quickly hear, you know, each of your perspectives, you know, one or two quick examples of where mobile you think is really making a huge difference in retail.
I mean, it's, you know, it's a huge, for a lot of our e-commerce companies, it's now 40 to 50% of revenue. And the key here is that, you know, the main touch point workhorse for these companies is email. People are reading their email on their phones, and when every day, you know, they get their email, they hit, you know, they click on it to see the product, and you want them to be able to shop right then and there. And you need to design an experience that makes that as simple and as frictionless as possible. So there's a real benefit. I mean, if you've designed that experience from the ground up, you know, it's extraordinarily powerful. And I think that's you know, to the extent incumbents are thinking about that, I think that's pretty key.
Yeah, I think we're seeing the same thing with our customers, and I think an investment in a responsive experience, right, across any device, any touch point, because scaling it across all the different devices is a challenge, is really becoming now the de facto approach. And you have to think mobile first. You have to think about that mobile customer, and they could be anywhere, you know, obviously, and so then therefore being able to target them also to in-store inventory and be able to find that product quickly also in the physical world. So it's not just about converting on the mobile device, you got to tie all those channels together, and it has to happen right now. And I watch my daughters shop, you know, using their phones, right, and they are deciding where to shop based on the selection. They're navigating on their phone, and then they actually want to know, is it there, before I make the effort to go there, but ultimately they want to see it first, especially if it's clothing. So in other words, it's all those touch points have to work together.
I maybe have a slightly different point of view. I'm not yet sort of blown away by what mobile has done to shopping. I believe that, yes, a lot more people are shopping using mobile just because they're spending more time with mobile. So obviously you'll expect more volume to come from the mobile device. But have we fundamentally created a new way to shop because we have mobile devices? I'd say outside of, that's why I think what Uber is doing and what Lyft is doing is very interesting. I think that's something new that would not have existed without mobile. And I think that's a question worth asking, because we used to ask this in the early days at Amazon, which is, if you can do something without the internet, then Amazon should not be doing it, right? And I think the same question, if you're really looking at mobile e-commerce plays, I think you should ask the question, if something can be done without mobile, then it's not that interesting. If I can go and shop on eBay with a desktop, yeah, I'm doing it on mobile, it's not that interesting at the end of the day. And so, haven't yet seen really innovative business models that truly rely on mobile from a product point of view, or truly innovative experiences. We saw a little bit with the in-store shopping, the showrooming thing, but it doesn't feel like it's gotten to any scale.
Well, people used to walk in with emails printed out.
Right.
That's where the web first became an omni-channel thing, right? But
Right.
now you don't need to do that. But I do think there's a convenience and a ubiquity
Absolutely.
Yeah.
that is transformative and is disruptive, even if it's not a completely different model.
No, I guess what I'm saying is I think the future is very bright for mobile, because I think there will be truly revolutionary experiences that were not possible without mobile. I don't think we've yet.
Yeah, I mean,
created those.
I would agree with you that for e-commerce and sort of marketplace models, for the most part, these are, online companies that are creating mobile experiences.
Yep.
With the one exception that there's some peer-to-peer marketplaces that I think rely on the camera in the phone. So you want to sell something out of your closet in a Craigslist-like experience, right? And so that's something that's truly differentiated, I think, from the online experience. But there are these classes of applications that could not have existed without mobile, right? Some of which are like Uber. That are location-aware applications, and then others where the application is on the mobile device. I mean, whether it's a fitness app, we're investors in a company called Fitstar. It's a mobile fitness application, and that
Exactly.
is reliant on it couldn't have existed without the mobile device.
If you take mobile and kind of broaden it to including tablets, and tablets disrupting the whole catalog experience. People used to sit at home and have catalogs, and now they've got iPads, and so there's a whole phenomenon going on there. And secondly, you go into a store and you start to combine the mobile experience with the store experience, where you can take a picture of an item or scan an item and get other people's comments about the item and things like this. Seems like ways to interpenetrate the physical and the
By the
mobile.
way, people still use the phone too. I mean,
There is
this all
that.
has to work together, I guess is the point. So the customer just expects consistency, relevance, and context, and the device or screen they're using, that's just a mechanism anymore. And if I pick up the phone and call, you better know who I am and know how to deal with it, and it better be the same information, or else I'm going to be frustrated. So I guess the point is, channels don't actually go away. We just sort of add to them. And catalogs still drive demand, by the way. If you're really measuring your business, you know that, right? You
Net-a-Porter. Net-a-Porter just create a huge catalog.
Exactly.
Right? It's like
So, it's sort of like channels don't go away. We just keep creating more convenient ways of interacting. And I agree.
Yeah. I would say consistency is a huge. I think it's a huge challenge for the incumbents, right? Because just on the pricing alone, having consistency across right now, there's lack of consistency, right? Even Safeway, like their prices online are different than the store. I mean, it is a little rankling for the consumer, sort of.
I mean, you're talking about bubble gum and duct tape. A lot of retailers. I don't want to point fingers.
No.
But we talk about omni-channel, we talk about in-store pickup, we talk about all those kinds of things. We talk about inventory online. The reality is the channels do not work very well together. Merchandising is still isolated. Marketing is still isolated. You've got web teams. You've got in-store teams. We're still a long ways away in retail of actually dissolving the notion of channel. It's still very present. We talk about omni-channel and whatnot, but the reality is there's a lot to be done for retailers to really deliver a real sort of channel-less
One thing I would sort of just add there is, I still believe that, we in the Valley tend to believe that, everybody has a cell phone, everybody's going to take their smartphone out, they're going to do things as soon as they enter the store. The reality is the number of people who actually take a phone out when they enter a store is a very, very small sort of fraction, because there's no real reason for you to sort of, we've not got the positioning right, we've not got the customer experience right, where it's a requirement that you take the phone out to do something of value, right? It's not like, like Google Maps or, something, or Yelp, where you need that to do something. This is still a very nice thing to have, and it's a very small fraction who actually.
The number one reason why people take their phone out of their pocket in the store is to call somebody,
Yep.
and ask them a question. And usually, my hypothesis is the reason why you take your phone out of your pocket in a store, you're looking for information.
Yep.
You're looking for reviews, you're looking for some validation that you're making a good decision. That's why you take your phone. And you might be calling your wife to make sure you're making a good decision, but but you're looking for validation. And I think whether it's product information, which really isn't present in the store anymore. I mean, sales associates, let's be honest, right? They usually don't have the answer. The web is where you're going to turn to for the answer.
Well, Ratnakar, you've thought a lot about this whole subject.
So a couple of things. I think I would agree with you in terms of shifting a traditional retailer to be truly omni-channel is one of the hardest things. That I agree with. But I think there are some key nuggets there in terms of successes. When you look at certain traditional retailers who have done that, Macy's is getting there because of the architectures that we built in the past.
And a commitment.
Yeah, and the commitment there. In terms of mobile, I think definitely the shift in traffic is something that we're seeing. So you say physical, we saw it to the web to mobile. And then in terms of mobile itself, so smartphone versus tablet, we're also seeing certain patterns. So smartphone, very evident that the customer uses a smartphone during the day as they're kind of roaming around. On tablet, it's more in the evening. And so creating those compelling experiences based on whether it's a tablet or a smartphone is key. And to your point of, has somebody really kind of fundamentally changed that experience so that you actually need a mobile phone to shop? I don't think so. I agree with you on that. But I do think it goes back to the earlier point of the brand and then the convenience and then the selection. If you have the right elements there, I do think people will use the mobile phone for shopping. Like Amazon is a big thing, right? So many people use
the Amazon experience on the phone is better.
It's unbelievable, right? And so that's the piece. I think it's about, again, going back to the earlier point of if you create the right convenience, if you have the right selection there, then I do think people will use that mobile phone or the app to shop.
So one of the things also which is worth maybe mentioning is, while mobile is very exciting, I think the notion of also displays as a technology is also very interesting in a retail concept, because displays tend to be much less friction. You don't have to pick a phone out. It's in your face, promoting a message. And I think you will start to see, as the prices come down, a lot more stores use displays to actually help people with applications in the store.
And I think the intersection there too is with beacons, with smartphones and so on, how do the displays become more useful to the customer? I think that's going to be really, I think one other interesting point about mobile, I don't know how the rest of the panel feels, but I think that what's interesting about that is it's about the habits you have as a consumer, because there's really only so many apps you're going to pay attention to or interact with. And so it's the businesses like Zulily that are driving traffic, every day to see what's there. It's those like, eBay or Amazon who've become kind of embedded into the lifestyle of the customer, where the demand is going to aggregate because you're creating a habit for the customer, whereas, a lot of other retailers are going to really struggle to get that kind of mind share.
So just to follow up on that, I think one of the fundamental issues with mobile, and the reason why I think it's such a challenge for e-commerce, is the entire app store model is based on a relationship model, which means I download apps with whom I have a relationship. E-commerce is fundamentally a transaction-driven model. And so, it's not like I'm going to download, the Polo app because I bought a Polo shirt once. And that's why I think the web is still a much more interesting place for e-commerce, because you've got the clearinghouse of transactions. That is Google, and you go there, you search, you find things. In a mobile environment, it is much
I don't think
harder.
they're any different anymore. I think they're
Agreed.
To your point earlier, they're kind of collapsed into one.
Yes, but the problem right now is you still are navigating with apps, and I just feel like, if you're doing stuff with a mobile browser, as far as I'm concerned, it's a different world, right? As far as I'm concerned, it's the web. You can look at it whichever way you want. But if you're looking at apps per se, it's really hard to get someone to download an app because they have that loyalty with you. They need to have a relationship with you. It's just the bar is so much higher.
Yeah, I think the consumer has to have a reason, right, for this frequent engagement. And so, like, you could either have the case of a Zulily where it is as much entertainment as it is shopping. Every day I'm going to get this catalog delivered to me, and it's going to be this new assortment every single day. I'll just give you another example. We're investors in a company called ThreadUp, which is an online marketplace for gently used clothing. Well, they process tens of thousands of items of clothing every single day. All those items, they come on one by one onto the system. If you've set up filters of the types of brands you're interested in, you can get a notification on your phone the minute there's a product available that is in your size, a brand you like, right? And that's kind of a unique thing, right? Because most retailers are putting new product in the store on a less frequent basis, right? Less frequently than Zulily every day or ThreadUp literally every minute. But I think when there's that kind of, there's something new to look at, right? It gives you a reason to have an engaging mobile experience.
The kind of the barrier for any brand to have their app downloaded, I correlate that to if you build a website today and you kind of launch a new brand, it's the same thing, right? So you have to have, you got to figure out what is it that is unique for a customer to come there, and what is it that they like, and what is interesting, and I think as you make it more interesting, to your point, and there's something that's very compelling for them to download it, open it every day, I think that's what will make.
That's what I said. On the web, you have the advantage that you have Google, even if you don't have
that. Is
right?
true.
On the mobile, you don't have.
You don't have that.
That's the problem.
That's the problem.
That's why a lot of the e-commerce transactions come from Google as the source.
Right.
Here, you just don't have that luxury.
Right.
Well, I'm curious, as you look at, the challenge for the incumbents we keep hearing is agility, and how do you respond faster and take advantage of the technology. The challenge for these attackers is how do you get to get the merchandising. So I'm curious, like Ratnakar and Brian, what are you doing to give agility embedded in the existing companies? And then for Patricia and Venky, how do you start to get the customer understanding and that marketing sense? And it sounds like you would say it's around technology, but it's kind of a differing challenges depending on where your starting point is.
I mean, I would say, obviously we're in the business of providing technology. Technology is an enabler, but I think it also has to be sort of the processes and the mindset within an organization, right? Developing more of a one-to-one relationship concept with your customer, thinking about merchandising in that same construct, getting beyond like just simple personalization engines into thinking about, driving a more holistic engagement with the customer, where you are giving them a reason to come back, and it is more personal, and you're moving away from just a blast and segmentation-based approach to communicating with customers. I mean, I think that's one element, and I think it's not just about the technology, it's about kind of breaking down the barriers and thinking about your business very differently. But it's difficult inside of a lot of retail organizations who not only have sort of business processes that have built up everything from sourcing product to distributing it to stores and thinking about Sunday circulars, I don't know who reads that anymore, but you still find them. So I think it's also about thinking about the business processes and being willing to fail fast while you learn how to engage with your customers in a new way that's mobile first, digital enabled, and drive that fluency inside your organization.
I have a simpler sort of rule. If Amazon's selling the product, don't bother. Right?
Yeah.
But they're probably
Agreed.
selling your product
Agreed.
too, right? I mean, if you're,
No, I just think
I'm
at the end of the day, I think you have to you got to solve the original point I made: the selection, price, convenience. You're not going to win the selection battle with Amazon today unless you can find categories or products that they're not selling. Because like to your point, you're not going to make it up on price or convenience anymore. So you've truly got to be honest with yourself as to how you're playing that game against Amazon. I don't think, because customers are pretty clear about it right now, right? So it's hard to play that game at this point with the amount of investments that Amazon's made and the sort of price that they can sell it at.
I don't think retailers should wave the white flag, though. I mean, I think they have to use their assets, which are their stores.
Right.
And I think they have to think about transforming that, which we talked about earlier in the conversation, right? They have to think about those stores as a very different way of playing a different role in the way they serve customers than they do today.
Ratnakar, I mean, you've done this at Macy's, you're doing it at Kohl, so you're like, how do you infuse agility into a legacy company?
Yeah, so to steer a big ship is really hard. I mean, it is one of the hardest things to do. But it starts, I think, with people first. So is the mindset there to actually transform the organization to be more agile? I think to your point of, there are these silos, they have all these agendas, how do you kind of transition that? Well, if you have a mission, and the mission actually is, okay, let's compete with Amazon, right? And or with any other retailer, because retail is just becoming so competitive out there. And if you don't do it, then you don't survive. That's actually a pretty compelling mission. So that in itself, I think, will drive the organization to think differently. So you have to start with that. Second is you have to say, okay, what are all the processes that probably worked 5, 10 years ago that you need to do away with completely or reinvent? And that is something that we're very focused on. It includes creative process, it includes marketing, it includes merchandising, it includes personalization, it includes a gamut of things that you have to fundamentally think differently. It includes how do you do kind of regular feature sets and builds. So for a company like us, at one point it was like 6 months releases was like, oh, that's great, we did a great job. But these days that just doesn't work. So how do you build more agility into that, right? So it's in process. And the last piece of this is technology. It is a lot about what are the technologies that you're using that probably at one point worked fine. You know, these big databases from IBM and others now don't work anymore. And cloud services, Qubell, which you guys kind of have built. So cloud and SaaS and using them to be more agile in the company, I think, are kind of the places that we focus on. But it's tough. It is a tough thing to steer a traditional organization. By the way, if you look at historically, every organization that has been uber successful has gone through this change.
Absolutely.
So.
I would say from the perspective of startups, there are 2 blind spots that we see most often. I mean, one is a disregard. Just inventory doesn't really matter. I'm not really worried about if an entrepreneur says I'm not really worried about inventory. My COGS are low. I don't really need to worry about inventory. That's kind of that is a big red flag. But the other is the importance of merchandising, right? And I think that's underweight in Silicon Valley for sure, which is having an aesthetic, having a point of view, really understanding kind of what is the customer looking for? What are they?
Having a meaning?
Yeah, exactly. What's the soul of this brand really going to represent? And I'd say, in the example of Zulily, from day one, Daryl Cavins had a chief merchant on board. And the other thing he was doing is he was regularly having breakfast with customers, right? And get a group of customers together, have breakfast with them, and really just understand what were they valuing about the experience. And that's the kind of appreciation for kind of what the customer perspective that I think is really important to get a successful e-commerce company off the ground. Because I think merchandising is in the DNA of the incumbents, and it's not in the DNA of traditional technology companies.
One thing I want to go, there are some interesting applications. We've looked at, I guess, years ago, there's Minority Report, and the question is, how close are we to Minority Report, where it's targeting of a unit of one, where you get customized experiences when you start to get into a retail environment?
I think we're very close. I mean, I don't think we're necessarily waiting for the technology. We're waiting for people to design the experiences. So I think there's still a tremendous amount of disruption to occur because we have so much kind of available to us in order to start to develop new experiences. 3D printing, you brought up earlier, that could be exceptionally disruptive. It's just right around the corner to hit scale, right? Obviously, beacons in stores, retailers, probably many of you in the room already experimenting with that. It's very early to understand, like, how do you really take advantage of that to personalize the experience as that customer walks in. We talked about interactive displays, and I mean, the question is more, how do you create an experience that the customer actually finds value in and is receptive to?
I'd actually disagree a little bit with that. I think there's a lot of room to go in terms of personalization still. I don't believe we have all the data we need, or maybe the NSA does, but we for sure don't.
The retailers don't.
Retailers don't, in terms of predicting what a customer wants to buy at a certain point. You'd be amazed how much we can still get better at that. And even Amazon, for how good they do things, it's still, the people who bought this also like this, it's still not always put in front, because, you get it wrong more often than they get it right. So it's I think there's especially with social media, with sort of starting to understand what people's, not intents Google has, but just what their interests are, what they'd be receptive to, I still think there's a lot of work to be done there. I still think that's a...
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say in Minority Report, right? Every offer is going to be relevant to, you know.
No, Minority Report was actually predicting what the person wants before they know they want it. And I think we're still far away from that.
Agreed. But,
Yeah, but I think the point more so is, I agree with you in terms of, you know, there's still a lot more work, but I do think for the first time there's actually technology there, which if you asked a traditional retailer in the past, like 5 years ago, we would say absolutely not. So with kind of the Hadoop infrastructures and all that are now part of the open source community and other things, we're now able to actually analyze large sets of data. We're able to build predictive algorithms. Yes, there is a lot of work. I agree with that. The question, though, is everybody asks, you know, can you do really one-to-one kind of an experience? What does that really mean, right? If you look at Amazon, it feels one-to-one, right? But in reality, in certain cases, it is not. Yes, they do the same kind of, okay, you bought, you know, baby stuff 10 years ago, and you might still recommend that. But there's some nuances there. But then to do true one-to-one, even for a retailer like us, it is actually very hard. Think about creating so many sets of content, practically impossible. Now, so next set of technologies, I think, is we need the ability. So we have the data, so we can analyze the data. Yes, we have to build better predictive algorithm. Then the question is, how do you assemble this content real time with machines? Not with people, though.
well, yeah, and it's no longer a page paradigm.
But also, I'd actually disagree. I don't think we have the data. That's my problem. I really don't think we have. We have transactional data,
Right.
which is what all the retailers
You have a lot of behavioral data as well.
Yeah, we have social.
That's living elsewhere. And so you got to now find a way to get data from Facebook, from Twitter.
And we do have
And then there's some stuff sitting in search. Now, even with that, I'd argue there's still a lot to go to say exactly when and what they are in the market for,
Oh, yeah.
right?
I mean, if you said, well, then you have to be the NSA, right? If you need every element of data, then
That's what at some level, that's my point, right? I think the data is where I think we will see us starting to add more and more and more
Right.
things and starting to build more and more knowledge.
Well, this was you were joking about NSA at the beginning, but I think that kind of is the barrier, right? Which is there's a privacy barrier.
There's
And
a
I mean, I
privacy
think there are
barrier,
companies
right.
that have been trying to make the in-store experience much more one-to-one and personalized, but people are a little freaked out about the
Right.
fact that I walk in the store and somehow, you know, my information pops up on somebody's screen, right? You know,
Well, I think
so-
that was the point I made. I don't think we are necessarily that far. I guess it's all about what do we mean by that. But are we 5 years away, 10 years away from starting to see things like that? Not necessarily anticipating my interests before I realize them myself, but more using a lot of these behavioral signals to derive offers for you. But the question is more how you design experiences that I as a customer welcome and find useful and don't reject, because it's...
Should the sales associate be wearing Google Glass, and when I walk in, they recognize me, and you know?
Actually, it's much. I'll give you a simple.
We've experimented that in our labs, and we're actually getting pretty close to being able to do that. You know,
Will that freak
in a
people
labs
out?
environment.
I don't know. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I want that,
Yeah.
right? I'm in a hurry.
Yeah.
Yes, I want someone greeting me at the door, and I opt in, of course.
Yeah,
But
if I opt in, right?
Let me give you a real example why I think we're so far away. There's a really simple use case which the customer does not give you any intent, and you have to predict for the customer, which is predict a good gift for the holiday season. And you'll be amazed what a poor job most retailers do in predicting a good gift for you. And so that tells me at some level there's a huge gap as to how well they know you and how well they know their own
Yeah.
product sets
Yeah.
in terms of making good predictions for you.
Before we go to Q&A, I'm going to do a quick lightning round, which is, you know, each of you, what's the biggest obstacle to overcome, and what's the biggest opportunity you think is going to be realized? And it's over like the next 3 to 5 years. So what's the biggest obstacle you think? Oh, I think you've already said data, but you can add another one.
So sort of since I sort of elevated Amazon before, I'd say the biggest obstacle to overcome for pretty much every retailer out there or every startup is Wall Street sort of giving Amazon a free pass in terms of
That is very
not worrying about making the investments. I think that just makes it a not level playing field for any of the other retailers. And that's changing. And I think once that changes, you'll start to see the world look very, very different. Biggest opportunity, it's what I sort of talked about early on in my opinion, which is I believe apparel is like music was 10 years ago. I believe that whoever cracks fashion and apparel online will open up the next wave of e-commerce, and it's going to be online, offline combined in some really interesting way. We haven't seen any models so far that have gotten to the scale that gets super interesting, like Uber and so on. We see some really interesting plays like Zulily, but I think really something will just explode out. That I believe online, offline with apparel, I think that magic some startup is going to crack.
Cool. Ratnakar?
For me, the biggest obstacle is how does a retailer like us continue to keep up with the customer expectations? And the reason is it's just not only Amazon, it is every other startup out there that is kind of changing the landscape, different business models, different expectations for the customer, right? So for a traditional retailer like us, that's the biggest kind of obstacle that we have to overcome. From our standpoint, and we're investing quite a bit on that, it also is the biggest opportunity. If we can crack that nut, right, as a traditional retailer, and keep in pace with different business models, not just only in terms of the experience, but different business models to kind of invent in terms of delivery, merchandise, and other things, then we will keep in pace. Otherwise, I do think some of us will become obsolete.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd say from the startup universe, probably the biggest challenge is getting to scale. I mean, it's easy is probably the wrong word to use, but a lot of online retailers can get to $30, $40 million in revenue, but how do you really break out? How do you become a major trusted brand? Earn the spot of being one of those apps on somebody's phone? That is it's tremendously high mountain to climb, and the one thing the incumbents benefit from are years of a trusted relationship with consumers. So I'd say that's the biggest challenge on the startup side. And the biggest opportunity, I do believe it is mobile, and that there are a bunch of markets out there, where Uber's an example. It's hyper fragmented markets where there is no great offline brand. There's nobody you're trying to beat in the offline world, and there is an opportunity to create a brand, so that's what I believe is kind of the most exciting area.
So I think really an obstacle is really understanding the lifestyle and the role of these technologies and touch points in the customer's life. If you're thinking about a traditional retailer, I think there's just a lot of blind spots, not recognizing how consumers are actually interacting with products, and actually, how is that demand signal like manifesting into a purchase? I think there's a huge gap there. I think a lot of retailers are just too, almost, I hate to use this word, but maybe lazy is a word, right? Stocking shelves and driving demand through Sunday circulars and blast advertising, and not realizing how the consumer's lifestyle has very much changed. I think from an opportunity standpoint, one thing we haven't really talked about is subscriptions, and how that could really start to change how consumers interact with brands, and the disruption that could take place within grocery and some of the commodity areas as well, where you start thinking about connected appliances, connected products and services that get built around that could also prove to be very disruptive. It's also an opportunity for a lot of retailers as well to think about, well, how do I make that more convenient to get that from me versus Amazon or someone else? But I think that's a potentially very disruptive and also an opportunity.
Just add one more for you, one more shot. So I think one thing we didn't cover at all was how products themselves are changing. And as people are spending more and more time online, people are buying less and less sort of offline products. And you don't see it much now, but if you sort of paint out the trends, and I look at my teenage son, he's very comfortable buying stuff, in-game purchases, which that's where he's spending his money, not on real sort of physical objects. It's just, I think that is a very interesting trend that's going to be an opportunity and an obstacle. People are just going to buy much less of the real physical products. Much more virtual stuff is going to be, because that's where people are spending time, right? You're already seeing that with cars. People are buying less cars, more smartphones. So that's the slow boil, if you will, that's happening.
Interesting. So with that, I think we're open to Q&A. We've got, it looks like we've got a person, we'll get a mic over to you so that we can get the recording.
Thanks. So my question is, in the future, who really cares about retail or retail brand? Because Uber started as a collection of taxi or car companies. I didn't care about which one I used. I used Google Shopping Express. I might get something from Kohl's, Walmart, and Target in the same order on the same day. I don't care. I use Eat Club. I don't know where my saag paneer, what restaurant it was made at, unless I like really look. And same thing is happening with Amazon Marketplace, right? I look at reviews on specific items mainly and ratings. And then there's people that make stuff. Maybe even like Etsy is a good example. There's people that make stuff, and then there's marketplaces that that deliver it. And do people in the future really care about the retail or the retail brand?
Well, you always have this trade-off between the aggregator and the brand itself, right? Even in today's retail world, there are very strong. We've got the Apple brand is a very strong brand, right? You come into the a Walmart store or you go to Amazon to buy an Apple brand. So you're always going to see some loyalty to the end product, the manufacturer of the product or the service or whatever. And there are going to be aggregators who also sort of accrue a lot of brand, and there's always going to be sort of a balance between that, right?
But I do think that it's in areas where there isn't a ton of brand affinity with any particular vendor, where there's an opportunity to build brand around being the aggregator, right? So I mean, eClub is a perfect example of that. There may be a few restaurants that have a lot of name recognition and people really want their food, but for the most part, people just want good food. And so if eClubs comes to represent good food, regardless of who's made it or where it comes from, that's the opportunity, right? And so I think that's a really good, I think that's been the opportunity for Uber. I mean, people don't care about the specific black car that comes to get them, but they do care about overall safety.
I do if I have a bad experience, which has happened to me on Uber. And by the way, they don't really have a great mechanism if always for feedback there. Well, so there are gaps in that experience too, even though 90% of the time it's a good one.
Yeah. Next question.
Hi, thanks. Not much was commented about the actual technology in the store. And so my question is really directed to the gentleman from Kohl's. You use ESLs, electronic shelf labels, in your stores, I have noticed. What led to that decision, and how do you deal with a lot of the technology? I mean, these are retailers, they're not IT guys, right? So how do you deal with all kind of the backroom stuff by putting technology in stores? And your comment about ESL specifically. Thanks.
In terms of technology within the store itself, right? So there's a balance, especially when you have a traditional retailer like us, because how much technology should we push in so that the associates and others can absorb? Because what we really want is not to overload technology there and have the associate actually serve the customer, right? So then the question becomes, how do you transform something like a store that's there? And it's a lot about self-service, digital displays, beacons where the customer can actually do the self-service themselves and be able to provide them the right information at the right time. I think that's where we're absolutely focused. Go ahead.
Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt, but we're also seeing some interesting changes with in-store technology where there's not really a separate system anymore. So the same system supporting the web channel, digital channel is supporting the in-store transaction. A lot of advantages for the retailer in terms of identifying the customer and aggregating data. Also, interestingly enough, I think the most omni-channel retailers are not retailers at all, they're telco companies. So some of our telco customers like E+ or others like that are actually the fastest at kind of eroding that barrier between in-store technology and what they might do for a self-service or a web channel or whatnot. So there is some interesting evolutions and disruptions that are happening kind of in the store.
Yeah, so just from my time with Walmart, what I would say is, it's running such a well-oiled machine that, and multiplied by 10,000, that pretty much every technology change has so much potential risk that it takes a lot of time, conviction, and pushing to get something in the stores. It's not, you've tried out a few stores as a pilot. So I would say the rollout period is still measured in years. It's not in months.
Especially for a store format like Walmart. Yeah. So I think it depends on the retail format.
We used to have numbers like every second of cashier time equal to, so many $1 million every year, and it's like, yeah.
Yeah, productivity is key.
Exactly, yeah.
But I think the lines are blurring really fast.
So next question, we'll go right here in the front. Wait, we get a mic to you. Actually, I'll go to you second. I'll get the person with the mic first.
Hi. So based on all the levers that you discussed, like impact of technology across retailers, right? You said that it's going to drive top line growth. Now the question that arises is that is it really going to drive consumption? Are consumers going to spend more because you give the right suggestions to me, or is it that it's just going to drive loyalty? That because you give the right suggestion to me, I'm going to go to you, and hence it's going to lead to increased consolidation within the market. So that's one question that I have.
We'll go with one question.
Okay, great. So that's a broad question.
This used to be the, this is so familiar to me from Walmart. Everything you do, the question is it incremental, right? And that's extraordinarily hard to prove, because you can make the argument that, at some level, very hard to prove that somebody saw your ad or saw your Google listing and came to your site or did something because of a coupon you did something different than they would have done otherwise, right? And proving that and convincing people about that is maybe where most of the time is spent.
And that's the legacy channel conflict problem, right, for retailers. Like, is it incremental or not that someone shopped online or shopped in the store? I think it's a ridiculous question, because the reality is, the real question is, did you capture the demand and did you provide a way for the customer to interact? And if you don't make that transition to the web, guess what's going to happen, right? So I think that legacy conversation about channel conflict is one that has to go away. Sorry, next question.
Next question. I'm going to keep this going, because there's like a forest of questions out here.
Yeah.
If you look at the time people spend online, clearly social media is one where it's far more than the traditional search and email. But if you look at commerce, it's vastly low. I mean, it's almost non-existent. What do you see the opportunity for commerce, and what is it going to look like in the likes of Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, Pinterest, etc.?
So actually, there's a huge challenge there, and we've experimented with trying to do social commerce. The problem is people don't like it. They're there for a specific reason, right, which is to connect with their community. And so trying to push this, okay, they want to buy at Kohl's, is like something that is, they dislike. But however, I do think connecting social into the shopping experience is something that has potential, right? And through that, and again, if you have the right brand loyalty and other thing, people probably will be more inclined to do social commerce than the other way around. And that's the thing that we're trying to continue to figure out.
So
Yeah.
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that Facebook and Pinterest are actually great drivers of traffic to our companies. I mean, they're the transaction's not happening, but they are fantastic drivers. I mean, they're targeting mechanics on Facebook that are super effective. With this lookalike feature that they offer and whatnot. So they are, and Pinterest, I think, is for certain demographics is better than Facebook. So they are very integral, I think, to a lot of e-commerce companies, but not necessarily where the and frankly, a lot of these companies want the transaction to take place on their site. They want the data. I mean, that's also, it was all, when Facebook was spending more time in commerce, was always one of the questions. Like, well, we want the data. We don't really want Facebook to have the data, right? But they're serving e-commerce companies very well right now from a traffic driving perspective.
So the way I'd sort of address that is, just focusing on Facebook. People go to Facebook to see what's up, right? That's basically what you're going to Facebook for. You can't go in and say, Walmart, that's what's up, or this product. So you have to, what we found was basically when we truly gave newsworthy sort of ads or drove traffic in that way, whether it was Black Friday or things like that, you saw huge uptake. But I think the catalog model fits Google much more. We have to manufacture news out of what the retail guys are doing, and till we do that, there's not a real sort of connectivity into Facebook. I think where Facebook works really well for shopping right now is new products, raising awareness, driving sort of usage
more traditional advertising
of really brands and stuff.
And didn't Bonobos just do a flash sale on Twitter that was supposedly,
Those work well, right? Because they fit the model, yeah.
So next question. Who's got the mic? There we go.
Hi, my name is Shanna Clark, and I work at coupons.com, so I work with big retailers on exactly this stuff. My question is actually on something I think you missed in some of this conversation, which is I think a lot of the innovation around retail is actually happening at the product side, whether it's Apple selling their products very well, or whether it's companies like Kickstarter, where products are getting innovation very early and getting to the market very fast, but it's also helping retailers. My question is about kind of the innovation around product itself.
Yeah, so I think we mentioned it at one point in the conversation. So products are continuing to evolve, right? Even for a traditional retailer like us. So where I see a lot of this is going is products and services become blended. This notion of the Internet of Things. Think about Nike shoes having some sort of a device that measures something. And then how do you provide that service for that customer who's part of your brand? And that's where I think a lot of the innovation is going to happen. Even if you look at the traditional kind of brands that we think about, right? Well, product innovation is, do you always have to launch a new product? Or is it more about kind of figuring out how to relaunch a product with the right brand? So for example, we have a private label called Jumping Beans, and then we have Disney, and we combine those two brands to create the Disney Jumping Beans brand. And that's sold phenomenal. So there is innovation happening in a subtle way, even in the existing products that we have.
So next question. Who's got the mic here?
Yeah. So all of you spoke about experience as one of the levers that will drive growth for retailers. Part of the experience is also in-store experience, and as you pointed out, speaking on the phone. So I'd like to hear your perspective on what kind of innovations do you see in the marketplace for that kind of experience growth?
So call, well, I want to make sure. So it's customer actually calling some other customer?
No, I meant the contact center.
Contact. So there you go.
Okay.
So that's why I wanted to make sure. So contact center, I think there's tremendous amount of opportunity to innovate, and we're exploring a couple of things. This whole notion of, again, going back to, do you always have to call a contact center, or can you bring that experience, like something like a Skype experience, into the store, is something that we're absolutely looking at. The challenge with that is, okay, how do you want to serve that customer? Again, it goes back to, this X amount of footprint. Where do you want to do that, and how do you do that well so that the customer is served very quickly and then is satisfied and then moves on, right? That's a little bit of a challenge, but there is innovation that we're looking at. Yesterday I saw kind of a robot that actually can go around the store that does service.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a big opportunity to kind of bring sort of expertise into that kind of whether it's in store or when I'm at home, or I have some question or problem with a product. And I would still say that we talk about Best Buy and Amazon and how Amazon has sort of disrupted Best Buy, but Best Buy, I think, just kind of gave them the business by not providing the expertise in the store. You walk into a Best Buy and it's just like, I have no idea how to make sense of this assortment, and there's nobody there who can really help me. So what's my next best option? It's actually to leverage the web, but still it's very hard, right? And I don't think Amazon's really cracked that nut yet either. Why can't I be Skyping in, or bringing a more personal experience into that interaction? It doesn't matter where I am. So that could be a way to evolve the contact center. And I actually think contact centers have improved. We all talk about how terrible IVRs are and this and that. I don't know. I think actually contact centers have actually pretty dramatically improved by bringing more context into it and streamlining that interaction with the customer. And I think it's all about convenience, speed, and multiple channels. It's chat, it's Skype, it's whatever I want to use, or maybe it's Facebook chat in the future as well, right? And so I think it's thinking about how to just deliver very contextual, live. If I have a problem, I want to talk to somebody, and I don't want to have to go through some automated experience, right? I want
Roll the
to
next
talk to
question.
somebody. Sorry.
'Cause I know I got a bunch. I've still got a bunch out here.
Will retail as a segment be more or less profitable in 3 years? And can the panelists predict some winners?
I think it depends a little bit on how the stock analysts are going to treat Amazon, right?
I think definitely that's going to be a driver. But you're starting to see, to my point, a little bit of movement there. You see Amazon raising Prime prices. So you're starting to see a little bit more as Wall Street starts to tighten up. You'll start to see things move up a little bit. But I do believe at the margins today, especially online, prices are set by Amazon, and it is what it is. I think it's a great place for Walmart, honestly, but it's going to be hard for a lot of other players.
One point that we didn't make earlier is also another interesting pressure on retailers, and that is branded manufacturers now are enjoying the margins of retail by going direct with their own stores and with web channels. So they used to sell at what, 10, 15, 20% margins to a retailer, and now they're enjoying 65, 75% margins. Okay, so if you're North Face, now you're like, I don't really care, REI, that you want some special assortment or pricing favors or co-op money, because I'm making a lot more money with my own direct channel. So if you're a retailer, how do you actually differentiate your assortment anymore? How do you actually drive better pricing? Well, you're increasingly, you have to have your own private label. So I think retail in general, probably a lot of margin pressure, but other sort of avenues around retail might actually be more profitable. So branded manufacturers is an example where they're loving direct business now and investing heavily in that, but kind of taking a very different attitude toward their retail partners. I don't know if you see that at Kohl's, but I think that's an interesting dynamic that's happening as well.
All right, so next question. I know you've been very patient up here. Can we get him a mic? Oh, you got the mic. Outstanding.
My question has to do with paying with mobile devices. There's been a lot of talk in the industry, and is that a high priority for retailers? If so, what's the benefit? What about MCX, ISIS, Klinkle, Duala, all that stuff?
So paying with mobile devices is a high priority. We are definitely part of MCX. We're looking at some of the wallet capabilities that are coming up. The problem is this. I think it is more of a technology problem, right? So which standard do you kind of go towards? And NFC, unfortunately, Apple hasn't embraced NFC. So now the question is, what do you really kind of focus on? So that's been the challenge for a retailer, to be honest. But is it a priority? Absolutely it is, because we do think that there will be a shift at some point once the technology has standardized on whatever it is going to be, that there will be a shift towards mobile payments. In fact, I see in the future a shift towards wearable payments too. So, and that's going to be the key.
And I think a big inflection point there is actually going to be fraud.
Right.
Right, fraud prevention, right? How do I tie multiple signals together with the customer, their device or their wearable, together with the payment type, and say, yes, I'm very confident that's
So one thing I would add here is, while we believe that these things will happen, the thing we have to be very cognizant of is we have to give the customers an sort of incentive to change their behavior. Because swiping a card is a very easy thing. If you want me to change that, you're going to have to give me something. And I don't think any of the guys today, including MCX, have really thought about what do I give the customer in return for making this transition and changing behavior.
It's not any more convenient.
It's not any more convenient, and till you can add some discount, you have to give them some real value.
That's why I think fraud is kind of an interesting way.
Fraud has to be paid back to the customer. You have to give it back at some point, otherwise I don't want to move, right? It's that, this is such an ingrained way of doing things, it's hard to change.
Actually, today I would say it's not even convenient at all to do a mobile payment.
No.
Because taking a card out and swiping it is much easier.
When Square first started to emerge, I would talk to merchants who were using it, and it's like, why did you make that change from your old POS to Square? They said, oh, it was the interchange rate. It was lower. It wasn't some dynamic new experience that they were able to deliver. It was very simple. It was the cost.
All right, next question.
So you guys talked about wearable tech. You talked a little bit about subscriptions, but can you talk about the future of technology in the channel when it really comes into your house with subscriptions, Google buying Nest, Apple's home interface? So it's going to go to the services first, but when is it going to tell you, kind of back in the old days when the milkman would deliver the milk for you, it just shows up at your door. Can you talk about the future of technology there?
I mean, from my point of view, I mean, it shouldn't be that hard for me to email a shopping list, a receipt to my refrigerator and have it even to know what I just bought in the grocery store as I'm bringing it home, and then be able to, sort of detect the signals of how I'm interacting with it, or even just predict how frequently are you buying milk and how frequently do you want milk, right? I mean, I think that's again, I don't think we're that far away from being able to do that. I think most of the technology is kind of available. I think it's around designing experiences that actually start to disrupt it. But even the appliance vendors who've been demoing this at CES for years, I mean, they really haven't solved the experience side of connected appliances, as an example, right, and tying that in. But I think we're getting close. I mean,
I think part of the
next
problem,
5 years, I think we're going to see a lot of interesting ways that could disrupt.
I think part of the problem is the use cases. While they look exciting to us, they're not that much value to a customer, really. I think we truly have to provide value where the customer says, wow, I need this and I cannot live without it.
Running out of milk is a hassle.
No, not as much as you. People have found a way to live.
I mean, we've seen technology companies trying to solve this problem, right? Sort of, a very, $30 less device sits in your kitchen, and you can scan barcodes of, items that you're about to run out of, and it, you can automatically get it ordered, right? But the question is there enough value there to the consumer?
What is Amazon's little scanning device? What's that called again? Anybody remember? Dash something?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that's an interesting thing to watch. I mean, that could be potentially a bridge to what we're talking about there.
But I guess my point is, I think we at some point also have to work backwards from the customer and start saying,
yeah, what's the problem?
What's the problem? How can we make a huge dent in what they're doing? How can we build something that they cannot live without, as opposed to something that it sort of helps them at the margin. But people, they like to follow their habits, and they figured out how to buy milk without us doing smart things.
There's 6 people in my house, and no one ever seems to be able to know when we're going to run out of laundry detergent. And so.
But I bet if you looked historically, you buy laundry detergent probably on a pretty regular basis. I mean, it's probably.
And you're up on this panel. You look like your clothes have been washed well. So we've survived.
So if somebody has your purchase history, that's probably all they need, right? Your purchase history is probably.
My point is, I do think there's opportunities to improve the customers. I think you're absolutely right. It has to start with the customer.
I guess my point is, if you want to make a customer make a real change, you're asking for a real investment from them. In which case, the payoff has to be very high. You cannot ask them to make a significant investment and give them a payoff which is big, right? That's the problem. Right now, all the payoffs I see are like this, and you're asking them to change entire behavior. That's not going to happen. And that's all I was saying.
All right, next question.
We're currently seeing a lot of a big increase in environmental responsibility amongst consumers. So do you think that's going to drive more consumers to the local retail stores, or might it actually increase e-commerce?
Well, I mean, I think one of the things that is a result of people being more environmentally conscious is this whole, what's called the sharing economy, right? And I think that there have been a bunch of companies that have popped up and doing quite well to address that. I mean, I talked about ThredUp, which is, a marketplace for used clothing. There are companies like Relay Rides, which is sort of, a car sharing service. I think that there are new types of services being developed to address a population that is getting more environmentally conscious.
There's also a site called Yodel, which was started by one of the ex-Walmart guys, which is about products that you don't use, that you just give away to your community, and you get some points in return. So I think the whole sharing economy is clearly a play around how we make, factor the environment and that into the picture.
But I think he's also asking the question, does a focus on the environment help companies that deliver to your door, when there is now the environmental impact of a delivery van driving around? Or does it help a store where you're going to go and the products have been shipped there in a more efficient way, but you have to go to the store?
I think it'll be difficult to trump convenience.
Convenience, right.
So I think but I do think consumers will value, environmental responsibility and footprint if other things kind of are neutral. I think there will be pressure on Amazon, for example, to reduce packaging and make that more efficient and more environmentally friendly. I mean, it is pretty insane if you look at your recycling. And you feel good about recycling, but just look at the carbon footprint of all of that, and obviously all the fulfillment. it's a concern.
Another example would just be in grocery. I mean, with the regulations around here, that you can't, you have to pay for bags in stores now, right? It just makes the retail experience just that much more onerous. I mean, it's the right thing to do, but you got to remember your bags. You got to remember to bring them to the store. It makes you want to shop on Google Express. I mean, not have to deal, right? I mean, it's just one more nail in the coffin.
But I think, to your point, I think people will continue to research which companies are being kind of socially responsible and making the investments to reduce a carbon footprint. And I do think, they will tend to do business more with those companies in the future.
Yeah, and I live in Seattle. I live in a neighborhood I wouldn't necessarily characterize as universal, but you notice how people shop differently for things like groceries, and they are using sort of Amazon Fresh for a lot of their commodities, and they're going to the farmer's market on Saturday morning, or they're going to Whole Foods to buy a lot of their fresh produce and meat and so forth. So already you see a change, but it's like this weird combination of convenience and environmental or health choices they're making.
Next question. Oh, we got someone way over here in the side table.
Thank you. So my question is more related to wearable technology. So we know my question is primarily around the retail. So we've seen a big rise lately around Google Glass and new wearable technology. My question to you, Ratnakar, and also to you, gentlemen, is to understand, do you guys see an interest or a fit for wearable technology as a strategy to expand the omni-channel? Because now we all understand that the complexity around building customer loyalty is becoming more challenging than even before. So how do you see wearable technology helping retail businesses to build that loyalty, but also provide a platform to consumers to have a much more consistent experience? Thank you.
Yeah, so I actually see a huge potential in terms of wearable technology. So in two aspects, right? One is wearable technology connected with services. Take, for example, fitness, right? That a brand can leverage to create an experience beyond just traditional shopping, but kind of services in terms of lifestyle and wellness is one area. And then you can take that to other categories too. And the other piece of this is wearable technology to, from a brand loyalty, and then in the future from a payment, if you kind of sort out all the fraud and security pieces in that. This whole notion of why should you ever take out a phone to actually pay within a store? Why should you ever take out a wallet to actually swipe the card? So if you think about that and make that experience very simple, easy, and convenient, and that's where I think the wearable technology comes into play. Yes, granted, we're kind of a couple of years away from that, but that's the kind of thing I think a customer will actually resonate. And you can think about loyalty points and all of that within that wearable device.
I think the first place you'll really see it, though, is actually with the associates, right?
Yeah.
I mean, already we see retailers starting to experiment with Google Glass and so forth. I think that there's some interesting ways that can also help the associate improve the experience for the customer as well. And
I think the other piece,
shorter term.
Other piece I would add is just wearables and health go hand in hand. Right. And health is a pretty big piece of the puzzle for some of the larger guys, the health products. So I think you'll start to see a lot of that as well.
All right, get a right here and then there. Go ahead.
Question on the, and maybe I was misunderstanding it, but it almost sounds like it's an either-or perspective of it's all going to be online or it's all going to be, offline. And I guess my question is your opinion on it being more of a lifestyle choice, right? So as, you've got the young kids that you were talking about who's doing everything on the phone, but then you've got people who it's an entertainment value, right? They want to go with their friends and they want to go and make a day of it. And, I used to be in the casino business and, it was pretty commodity, and then they started opening up everywhere and you had to make more of an event of it. I mean, Vegas even. I mean, they make less money on casinos than they make on everything else. So my question is, would it be more of a, psychographic, personality type of segments that you need to start really segmenting to the people that want to go out, the generational, like a lot of people are retiring, right? So they might want to go out and enjoy a day shopping and eating. And so just a question on like, would that change how you're marketing to your customers?
So I have to, first of all, I have to believe that stores are not going away.
Let's establish that.
So let's establish that. You also have to believe, and I'm probably in the minority. I got it, Silicon Valley. I understand all of that. But you have to also fundamentally believe that if that is going away, that you fundamentally, with everything that we talked about today, you're just going to be in your house. Work, house, maybe a park. You might go to a park. That is just not the human nature. That is just not us, right? Yeah, restaurant, I got it. But let's say, for example, food is delivered, right? Why do you need to go to a restaurant? But the point, though, is we're human beings that do want some social element to it, right? So to your point is, why would somebody go to a store? I do think there will still be this notion of let's actually go out, go to a mall, go to a store, and kind of with the family. And I do think that will continue to be there. And it's been there in the American history for a very long time. The question then becomes, does that experience actually change from what it is today to something that is there tomorrow? And I think that's absolutely correct. And there, that's what we're trying to figure out is what does that experience change to?
I think there are retail formats that are probably going to kind of go away, but there are other retail formats that will probably thrive. And retail and stores are not going away, but they do need to transform. And a lot of the incumbent retailers today are going to be under a lot of pressure to make that transformation.
And by the way, the customer doesn't think, online, offline. They just think about a product they want to get, how quickly do they want it, how much are they willing to pay, and they've made this decision up very quickly. I think we sometimes, we are so focused on how we deliver the product to them. They really, it's not something, like you said, that they care about that much.
All right, next question, over here.
My question about trends in technology and globalization of commerce. You look at Europe, you look at North America, you look at Asia, and there is quite different pockets of leadership and laggarship. Groceries in Europe seems to be far more advanced than they are in the US. So what's happening? And how do you see what's happening now and what's going to be happening in the next few years, helping global retailers reach even more global customer base? Or local custom rules suppliers are inhibitors that at some point in time sort of create the impenetratable channels?
So I can talk about the emerging market side of things.
Probably quick answers.
Very quick, yeah. Emerging market. I think very quickly, what you see is, unlike in the US, there's no access to organized retail in tier 2 and tier 3 and beyond cities. And so e-commerce is the only way you can get access to product. And so that's why growth in emerging markets and e-commerce is skyrocketing in China and in India.
Other comments?
Well, I would say, it's sort of interesting to see, though, also how brands and retailers in those markets are not actually investing in the web. If you look at China and Russia, it's just starting to begin, and I think it's very interesting to see how they're going to react. And I think brands are actually kind of allowing the marketplaces to accrue even more power through that disruption. And I think it'll be very interesting to see how that evolves, because the marketplaces are, dominating. Online, mobile, and I think it could be exceptionally disruptive in those markets, especially.
All right. Well, I think panelists might stay for a couple of minutes to answer, because I know we didn't get to all the questions, but I want to thank them for their contribution. It's really great. Thank you.
Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Definitely want to thank all of you for sharing your opinions so authentically and for having such an engaging conversation. We really do appreciate it. And a very special thanks to Avery, who catalyzed, organized, and made this panel happen. So we really appreciate your role. As a very special thanks, we have for you the Churchill Club Speaker T-shirt.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
early tomorrow, a recording of this program will be available for viewing on our YouTube channel. I want to thank SAP Grid Dynamics and Qubell again. And one last thing, very important, if you happen to be one of the people who put your card into the Grid Dynamics bowl to potentially win a Samsung watch, Kristen Quinn from at Walmart Labs, please pick up your Samsung watch out at the lobby desk.
Hey, Kristen.
You have been a wonderful audience, so thank you so much. Have a safe evening, and we'll see you next time. Good night.